So let's look at this. Let's talk a little bit about this angle. Joining us now to discuss, former Assistant Treasury Secretary Monica Crowley and Kash Patel, Senior Director for Counter-Terrorism on the National Security Council under President Trump, and also Deputy to the Director of National Intelligence. Well, thank you, folks. Kash, I want to get to you in a moment on some of these technical issues, because I don't understand this list, and I don't understand what's in it or off it. But Monica, come to you. You have a long history of international affairs, as well as your service in the Trump Treasury recently. Isn't it important to sometimes say no? And isn't it important, either directly or through intermediaries, to say there are going to be costs and consequences if you do X, Y, and Z?
On the international stage, Larry, President Trump, President Nixon, President Reagan radiated American strength. And in many ways, they just had to be. Oftentimes, they didn't need to say or do anything, and our adversaries got the message. President Biden, on the other hand, radiated weakness. On this trip, he was so desperate to be liked and to prove that he wasn't his predecessor that he ended up surrendering at every turn. I remember President Trump used to say, the American people hired me to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris. And that's 1,000% true. When you look at that cyber issue, when President Biden turned over that list of 16 American sectors that he said were off limits to cyber hacking, I mean, why didn't he just draw him a map as to our most critical cyber infrastructure and tell Vladimir Putin that's exactly what we value most in this country? Think back to 2012, Larry. Do you remember when President Obama, right before that election, told then President Dmitry Medvedev, you know, I'll have more flexibility after the election? Yeah. We have no idea what went on behind the scenes here at this meeting, or what his administration is also doing behind the scenes to accommodate the Russians or the Europeans or the Chinese.
Well, okay, let me go to Kash. Kash, I'm counting on your technical cyber expertise, which is not exactly my field, but I'm going to give it my best shot. First of all, I don't understand. Was this a list? I have some guys that I know used to work in the government are saying this list comes from a DHS list of essential sectors that had to stay open during the pandemic and COVID. Is that where this list comes from? Or is this more thought out? That's part A. And part B, Kash, what about the other stuff that either may or may not be on this list? You know, I mentioned social media sites and media tech and personal hacking and so forth. I don't get any of this.
Sure, and Monica hit it on the head in terms of step one. We just gave him a roadmap of our most critical elements. And imagine if President Trump had given that roadmap to President Putin while he was still in office. The media would have excoriated him. But getting back to the list itself, in terms of, and you were in the White House and so was Monica, this list comes from a combination of classified sensitive information which we guard safely and securely because we don't want our adversaries to know how America defends itself. And we just partially handed over a list of information that normally would be classified. Now, the back end of that list, Larry, where it comes from is we have a National Intelligence Priorities Framework, and that framework is dictated by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to note out what is most important to the entire IC for America's freedom and independence and national security interest. And then the intelligence community goes out and protects those sectors based upon the prioritization of the administration and the intelligence that we already have collected.
So Kash,
to give Russia and President Putin.
Let me just, I don't mean to, I just want to clarify. So that's where the list comes from. It wasn't a list hanging around from essential COVID industries. You're saying this was a national intelligence list. That this was, you know, the highest level. These are our key areas. I just want to establish that, because I haven't seen any derivative of this in the papers yet. I haven't seen anybody write this up yet. So you're saying that's where it comes from. Okay. Now, let me just...
It comes from a multitude of agencies.
Okay. So high-level national security, DNI type stuff. Fine. Let me ask you about the other question, which may be naive. Either because of the general nature of these 16 classifications, Kash, or because there's stuff left off the list, does this, in fact, leave openings? Even this is theater of the absurd. It's all crazy. But does this say to Putin, there's stuff you could go after?
Absolutely. It identified what he can go after, what's not on the list, and it also opens up the American intelligence community to attacks from people in places that we thought we were safe because we hadn't publicized that information to the world. It's a two-part list, one that is inclusive and one that is exclusive, and he seemed to hand over the top 15, which comes from a collection of agencies to say, this is what we do when America's under attack. These are the top 15 places we need to protect.
Well, what can
and there's other things related to that.
What's not there that could be attacked? Again, this is surreal because we don't want Biden to attack, Putin to attack anything, anytime, okay? No houses on the block should be allowed to be robbed, to use John Roberts' metaphor. But Kash, what I'm saying is, just off the top of your head, I asked about Netflix, I asked about Twitter, I asked about Google. What's not on the list that's so obvious that he could attack?
Everything that we do in space and everything that we do underwater for national security.
Wow. Monica, okay, you heard that's a hell of a... Kash, you ought to write that up. There's an op-ed piece. Nobody knows the answer to that. I've never heard it quite so clearly. Monica, what about the personal information side? Don't we fret about... we didn't like it when Colonial was shut down by cyber hackers coming from Russia, one way or another. But what about the individual issues, the freedom of speech, and, financial stuff, credit cards and whatnot? What about that stuff? Shouldn't we make a clear statement that that's off base?
Oh, absolutely. And you would think that the American president, who's hired to protect and defend each and every one of us, as well as the homeland, would make that perfectly clear, that Americans' most sensitive data should also be off limits. We have seen in recent years major hacking events, including of the Office of Personnel Management for the federal government. So every federal employee has had their Social Security number, God knows what else, floating out there at the mercy of Chinese and other hackers. So this is something that the president should have made much more forcefully. And I'll make one other point, Larry. The American president, I remember President Nixon used to say, in dealing with America's adversaries, what you don't say is as important and sometimes more important than what you do say. And in this case, there should not have been any kind of list. It should have been a blanket statement from the president telling President Putin, don't even think about it, or there will be consequences that you cannot even imagine.
See, that's what, Kash, let me pick up on that. It's the last point we have time for. It's like a New York statement, New York thing. You want to hack? All right, pal, I'll show you hack. You want to come and threaten you're going to hack? We have better cyber technology than Russia does, do we not, Kash Patel? We could hack their you-know-what off if we wanted to. Their military, their nuclear, their spy agents, their oil fields, every darn thing they got. Our technology, I'm not an expert here, although I did sit in a lot of meetings with this stuff. The question, why Biden should have made it very clear. You want to hack? I will just hack your keister off, to use Reagan's phrase. Last word, Kash Patel.
Look, as a guy from Queens, I totally understand the New York state of mind. And yes, we can hack their pants off all day long. But the thing President Trump did that President Biden didn't do is we know our capabilities. We don't have to advertise them to the world. And we have a system of laws in place where we can go out our adversaries. And like you said, he should have gone after President Putin, and he didn't.
That's
and
all
America
I want.
Suffered for it.
I don't know. I think, Monica, you agree with me about the people-pleasing. People-pleasing is real. I think people-pleasing is bad psychology anyway. But people-pleasing at the highest levels of global statecraft is a real bad idea. And we've learned that. You're right. We learned it from Dick Nixon. We learned it from Reagan. We learned it from Trump. We learned it from a lot of people. We learned it from Harry Truman, for heaven's sakes. Maybe Joe Biden needs to learn it again. Anyway, Kash Patel, Monica Crowley, thank you. Appreciate it very, very much. Up next on